Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to do a weekly meta breakdown for the Explore Best of One format. What we do here is we look at the best performing decks each week across all the formats on Arena. If you're looking for Standard, Historic, Alchemy will come later in January and the qualifiers happen, Best of One, Best of Three. Check out the playlist. We try to cover it each week and look at the top performing decks. We get all the data, what you see on the screen from UntapedGG companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client. Tracks win rates, loss rates, deck collections, gives you a whole bunch of cool stats, in-game overlays. Link is in the video description if you want to get started with a bunch of that for free. I will also paste all these deck lists into the video description, so if you want to copy that, please go ahead and try to get, Mythic, top 1200, whatever goal you want. That's what the video is to help you reach. Quick programming note, or kind of administrative note, if you may. I'm closing in on 7,000 subs on the channel. It would be really awesome to hit that goal before the end of 2022. We only have a couple days left, but if you enjoy this type of content, we do gameplay, a whole bunch of stuff on the channel. I usually don't like pitching this every video, but really close. It'd be a cool milestone to hit before the end of the year. So hit subscribe, it's free to do so. If you're already subscribed to the channel, as always, if you hit the like button, drop a comment, even say the word nice. It just helps the algorithms at work. But we'll jump into it. So this is December 19th through the 26th, the holiday edition of Explore. So we've had a good stretch of time that we've had Explore Anthology 2 cards in the format. And we have 50,000 games from Platinum to Mythic Rank. And the top deck is Mono Red Burn, but not really the Burn deck we were expecting. No Eidolons, nothing like that. This is kind of a prowess, cast stuff from your graveyard, Dreadhorde Arcanist Burn deck. So you have Dreadhorde Arcanist as kind of the engine of the deck. Lets you flashback spells equal to its power without paying its cost when it attacks. And then what you're trying to do with the deck is scale it up. So you have like Ancestral Angers that can get it bigger. So you can cast some of your bigger spells. Also gives trample, draws a card, so cycles the card. Kumano's ways to put counters on it. You have the package of Monastery, Swiftspear, and Soulscar Mage. Both of these are prowess threats. So when you cast non-creature spells, they get bigger. They have a lot, like the haste off this, the shrinking off the Soulscar Mage is useful, and that plays all really nicely with Reckless Rage. So Reckless Rage deals 4 damage to target creature, 2 damage to creature you control. Well, with the prowess, it goes up to 3 toughness, so then your creatures don't die. So it's a nice kind of 1 mana, kill pretty much most of the things in the format, at least in the best of one format. You got Play with Fire, Spikefield Hazards mixed into there. Bone Crusher Giants, you can't flash back the Stomp, but still just a good creature all around. Light up the stage, if you can get up to 3 power, you can flash this back from the graveyard, otherwise just cast it for its spectacle cost. And then Wizard's Lightning. This is the only card I'm not confused, just unsure of, is the word I'm looking for. Now, usually this gets played in the Wizard's Tribal deck in Historic, but you're there 12 to 15 wizards in that build. This one only has 8 between Dreadhorde Arcanist and Soulscar Mage, so it's unreliable in terms of hitting it for necessarily 1 mana. You might want Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike's also a little bit easier to turn on with just a single Ancestral Anger on this, or a token from Kumano. I'd probably go with the Lightning Strike over the Wizard's Lightning, all things considered, because this is a monk, not a wizard. The mana base very lean, mean, 18 lands, looking to just go quick, but you also have the spike fields to 20. Lots of just mana sinks if you do flood in this particular deck. The next deck, kind of similar elements, but this is the Boros Heroic, Boros Magecraft-esque deck, so similar concepts. Dreadhorde Arcanist, Monastery Swiftspear, Reckless Rage, but you also have cards like Favored Hoplite. Battlewise Hoplite is a different card from that deck of seasons past. So this is a 1 mana 1/2. When you cast a spell that targets it, you get to put a counter on it and prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. So neat little combat trick in there that gets scalable bigger. You have the Illuminator Virtuosos that when it gets targeted from a spell, you get to connive, draw a discard, and then put counters for if it's a non-land card. 10th District Legionnaire, another card that just gets bigger when you target it. So a lot of the deck you're just trying to target with your spells. And what are we targeting it with? The Anger for the Trample. Trample on the double strike is a hell of a drug. Defiant Strike, plus power, draw a card. Draw a card. So there's a lot of cards to kind of cycle. You have Gods Willing to protect your spells from removal. You have the Reckless Rage as the removal spell in the deck. You have Homestead Courage as a way to give counters, basically 2 spells in 1 in this deck, as well as a good card to connive because you get the counter plus you can flash it back. This also gives Vigilance, so you get to go offense, defense with it. And kind of the big blowout card is Invigorating Rampage. 2 mana, and you get to choose one of the options. Either target creature gets +4/0 and trample, so even this single target of this can be 6 double strike with trample, or 2 creatures get 2/0 and trample. So you got 4 added power that you can distribute between 1 or 2 creatures with this. And a big upgrade for this deck is the Battlefield Forge that came from Brothers War. You now have 12 dual lands that come into play untapped, so no tap lands in this deck is a really big bonus in this. We then go to Golgari Elves. The historic elves have found their way into the Explorer format, 61% win rate, and this deck got a boost with Shaman of the Pack, 3 mana, 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. So what are we trying to do? Make a lot of elves. And there's ways to do it. You have a bunch of accelerants, 12 1-mana accelerants or pseudo accelerants. Dwindling Elite is 2 bodies in 1. The War Master lets you create elves once a turn whenever you cast. It's also a really good mana sink to buff up your team. The Clan Caller is a Lord effect that can search for more copies. Leaf Crown Visionary is a Lord effect that can draw you more cards when you cast. You got Circle of Dream Druids for just the Gaia's Cradle style effect, draw or make a bunch of mana equal to the number of creatures you control. Realm Walker for card advantage, and then you have Coco to find all your pieces. You got Secluded Cards in here to name Elf, the fast lands, as well as Nykthos for big mana generation under the deck. We then go to Selesnya Angels. So this version here is not really playing like the Kyla's Retribution, stuff like that. It's kind of like the older version I was playing, where I really like Prosperous Innkeeper in these builds. It gives you another option. It is a single life point. It makes it easier with the Bishop of Wings. So basically any copy of Luminarch Veteran, Prosperous Innkeeper, and then Bishop of Wings automatically turns on Resplendent Angel. So this build is more focused on turning on Resplendent Angel overall. And then Trellisar is a good backup plan that helps you dig to the Ajani Strength of the Pride, so it's a good mirror breaker. And then this also just helps you to potentially turn 3 Coco and get ahead on certain things like that. Yeah, got the subscribe going, thank you. And then with the mana base here, I would change it, so you should get rid of the Sun Petal Groves and maybe one Overgrown Farmland, 1 Plains, and then play Brushland, which is the Pain Land. You want untapped lands as much as possible in this particular deck. And this isn't as reliable because you only have 10 sources, so this potentially could come into play tapped on 1, where you might want to go 1, 2, 3, and it kind of screw you up that way. We then go to Mono Blue Spirits, 58%, so no changes for this. Looks like they're on the Combat Research plan again, and then some slip out the backs, but basically this deck here, what you're trying to do is get a threat out, throw on a Curious Obsession, Combat Research, draw a bunch of cards, protect your spells with counters, or Rattle Chains to give hexproof for the turn, flash and stuff, tap down stuff, and just kind of tempo your opponent out. We've covered this multiple times. I have videos on my channel if you want to see this in action, but it's a very powerful deck. Then we go to Abzan Greasefang, 58%. So the addition in this deck is Satyr Wayfinder. Pretty like, you see, oh, 2 mana, 1/1. Well, what's this doing? Well, it's another card that gets to put cards into your graveyard. So Satyr Wayfinder enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards, put a land from among them into your hand, put the rest at the bottom of your graveyard. So it's just another way to get cards into your graveyard. Pair that with Witherbloom Command, Grizzly Salvage, the Raffine's Informant. You have a lot of ways to throw vehicles into your yard to reanimate them with Greasefang and give them haste. So as early as turn 3, you can start Parhelioning your opponent to death. We then go to Mono White Humans, which is a newer deck in the format, and it was brought together with the addition of Brave the Elements. So very powerful instant. 1 mana, choose a color. White creatures you control gain protection of chosen color to end the turn. Now we've had God's Willing, which we saw in the Boros Heroic deck. God's Willing notably only gives a target creature protection. This gives all white creatures, which your deck happens to be all white creatures. So against a monocolored deck, you can just swing in and your opponent can't block. So you have it's basically a human tribal deck built into this mono white shell. And what you have is like Dauntless Bodyguard for protection, Hopeful Initiate, which gets bigger, Recruitment Officer that can find a number of soldiers incidentally. So you have like Thalia in here, Thalia's Lieutenant, which grows your team. And then the Brutal Catharsis Soldier. Yeah, that's it. So there's still quite a good hits. It's not like strictly mono white soldiers like we see in Standard. But basically Thalia's Lieutenant buffs up the team. Adeline and Lieutenant works really nice, where the token off Adeline also pumps then the Thalia's Lieutenant. Extraction Specialist is a nice card where you can rebuy either like your Luminarch Aspirants, or if a Thalia's Lieutenant died, get to bring it back from the graveyard and then pump up the team. So even though you have passive cards where they can't attack or block, you have stuff like Thalia's Lieutenant, which puts counters, Luminarch, which puts counters, but Dauntless Bodyguard, which can protect something late game as well. This deck also gets addition of Mutavault, which is a creature line that has all types, but notably it's 1 mana to activate for a 2/2, which is a really good rate. You pair that with stuff like Chefnet Dooms, which is another pump effect, or Castle Ardenvale. There's a lot of utility lands in this mono white deck. We then move to Azorius Control. So we got Kahira in here, creatureless control. As always with these decks, I like to feature how you're winning with the control deck, and then what your kind of in-between effects are. So you have Wandering Emperor. It's both removal and a threat generating machine in terms of samurais. You have Teferi, which can tuck itself and just be annoying, and then exile all your opponent's stuff and just slow things down. And then there's a couple copies of Shark Typhoon. You can cycle it, you can be a Chad and hardcast it, whatever way you want. And then there's usually a copy or two of Hall of the Storm Giants in the mana base just hanging out as a creature line. You also technically have Kahira, which is a 3/2 that can attack. It gives you no boosts to your creatures because you ain't playing no dinosaurs in this deck. Sharks are not part of the listed text, but what you have in this deck is a bunch of early removal, March of the Otherworldly Light, Portable Hole, Fateful Absence in there. You can sweep things up with Supreme Verdict and a Farewell on the top end, and then some counters and Censor, which can be cycled if it's not useful in the late game. Dovin's Veto counters everything, Absorb counters, hard counter with life gain tacked on. Behold the Multiverse is something you can do on 2 and then basically cast it with the Teferi untap, as well as Memory Deluge in here as well that can help you dig and then recast it out of your graveyard. And then lastly, Mono Green Devotion. This deck's very good in best of 3. Little odd configuration here. So the deck usually plays 22 lands, and it should be up 4 Storm the Festivals and 4 Kioras. So interesting decision on those numbers. I would trim and play those because these are the best. Like Kiora allows you to do broken things as well as the Storm the Festival, which helps you find stuff. In this particular deck, what you're trying to do is build up Devotion with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. So you have a bunch of early accelerants. The ideal hand is like turn 1 Llanowar Elf, turn 2 Old Growth Troll or Kiora, and then turn 3 kind of go to town with copies of Nykthos. A lot of these cards pay for themselves in the sense that Old Growth Troll costs 3 mana to cast but generates 3 mana off the Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. You also have Cavalier of Thorns, which can help you dig for your Nykthos, as well as bin copies of Storm the Festival. Kiora untaps the Nykthos, which generates even more mana. And then with this particular deck, you have a Karn sideboard. But keep in mind, best of 1, you can only have 7 cards. Largely, this looks pretty solid. The one thing I would change is this should be Hatewire Might, I would think, over the Great Henge. Most lists don't play Great Henge to begin with. You could, if you... Actually, no. Scratch that. This should be Sky Sovereign. Count the boat. This should be this card right here. Sky Sovereign. So, basically, instant speed way to deal with Greasefang. Pithing Needle. You can name opposing Karns. I would probably do this Stonebrain instead of Pithing Needle. So, boat, Stonebrain. Stonebrain is brought into the mirror. With the mirror, you search with Karn, you first name Karn, get rid of their Karns if they haven't played it, and then you can name like Storm the Festival, and then kind of all their payoffs. They could generate a whole bunch of mana, but if they have nothing to kind of pay off with, then you kind of go from there. Shadow Sphere is really good against all the aggressive decks, gains you life. Karn Silex is a board wipe, City Escape Leveler just destroys everything. It's a big chunker. You have Portal Phyrexia in kind of, if your opponent only has a couple threats, sweep their board and then win off their own creatures there. So Sky Sovereign, Stonebrain, cut 2 forests, Storm the Festival, Kiora 4-Fs. So that should be the configuration. I'm actually going to just take a look. I want to go to best of 3 for a sec, see if they have a list there. Okay, so yeah, this looks like a better configuration. You sometimes see a copy of the Might Stone and the Meek Stone in lieu of the second Nisa. Nisa tends to be a little bit win more, but here's another configuration of the list if you're interested. But you'll see 22 lands is usually the configuration, but at the very least, do those changes that I suggested. In any case, that is it for the week. Let me know what you're playing, how you're doing at the end of the month. If you're making it towards the top 1200, 250 Mythic. If you hit Mythic for the first time, I had a few folks who did that. Let me know in the comments as always. It's greatly appreciated. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the channel. Closing in on 7,000 subs. Be awesome to hit that. Thanks everyone for watching. Hope you have a great one and stay safe out there.